Okay. I'll let you guys.
Okay.
Hello, hello. Okay, sorry.
No, I want to rap. You guys would laugh at me when you hear my.
All right.
I don't look like I could, but I can. I said I want to rap at this thing.
Well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you staying here so you can be part of this industry panel this afternoon. We definitely have the pleasure of having our esteemed speakers this afternoon. We're going to actually just go ahead and start off with them giving kind of a brief introduction, where they work and kind of like their pathway, and then get into some questions. But definitely we want to make sure that there's time at the end to make sure that you have an opportunity to ask them some questions as well. So I guess we can get started with Valerie. Want to go ahead and get started? Yes.
Sure. Hello. I'm Valerie Perham. I am a part of the People and Culture team with Fujifilm, Holly Springs, and I specialize in diversity, equity, and inclusion and talent sourcing. So actually, I'm very new to my position. I just started 2 weeks ago. Thank you. So I'm just really excited because all of the executive leaders at Fujifilm have been so much behind diversity and inclusion and equity, and they're just really championing around me. And, if you were here earlier, you heard people mention there's not much diversity in biotechnology. And that is something that we're trying to change. So I'm really excited, and I'm just hoping to connect with people in here who also want to see that change. And we're open to anyone, actually, but but that's one of the initiatives that we are focusing on too.
So hi guys, I'm Chris Coates and I'm the HR director at Thermo Fisher Scientific. The facility that I work at is actually in Greenville, North Carolina. It's not too far. Okay, it's not too far. We've got about 2,000 employees there. Our plan is to grow to about 3,000 in the next 5 years for our glide path. We've got about 100,000 employees globally, and we consider ourselves the leader in serving science. So I'm with Thermo Fisher Scientific, and I'm Chris Coates. Nice to meet you guys.
Hi, my name is Wade Smedley, and I am the HR director for Merck. We are located in Durham, just about 10 miles north of Durham. We have a vaccines manufacturing plant up in Durham, where we're making some things that you're probably familiar with, like mumps, measles, and rubella vaccine, chickenpox vaccine, and we are currently making the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine. So it's a really exciting time for us. We are about 1,000 people right now, and in the next few years are growing to probably around 1,500. And I'm just pleased to be here and happy to answer whatever questions you have and support, provide any advice or tips that I could for all of you.
Great. So just a plug, before you leave today, these are the 3 people you want to make sure that you speak to before you head back to your car. So we'll just jump right in with some of the questions this afternoon. So the first one is, so what types of entry-level positions does your company have? And what skills or certificates and or degrees are needed for those positions? And also, are there any particular skills that give you more of a competitive edge based on what you've seen over the years? Okay. Wade, we can start with you.
Sure, I'll give it a shot. So we, with 1,500 people, or soon to be 1,500 people, we have a variety of different functions in our plant. We're obviously manufacturing vaccines, but in addition to the manufacturing of the vaccines, we have the normal departments that you'd think: finance, HR, quality, warehouse, shipping, receiving, all of those things. And within any of those areas, we have a variety of different opportunities for employees that, based on their background, education, and interests, you may be early in your career and you may have an opportunity as an operator on one of our manufacturing lines. Those folks can come from a high school degree, maybe a little bit of advanced education, maybe like a BioWorks degree, or some orientation to good manufacturing principles, which is something that we would have to follow since we're FDA regulated. If maybe you have a degree in biology or chemistry, you may be interested in one of our quality labs where we're actually running tests on the products that we make to make sure that the quality is there and that all the components are working properly. To a smaller degree, we have a finance department and a human resources department, but we from a manufacturing standpoint, we have a variety of different opportunities at the entry level, but you can also move within the organization up to higher levels of responsibility as well. Back to the initial question about what there's skills that we're looking for. Again, it's kind of varied, but if you're just early in your career and you're looking for an opportunity as an operator, high school degree, we have a lot of teamwork that happens in our plant. Probably my colleagues do as well. And so being able to work together as a team is a really, really important component. We can teach you about how to make what we're making, and it's probably unique to how we do it here at Merck, and it's probably unique to how you all would do it at your shop. But getting along with others and figuring out how to work together as a team is one of the more important components of what we're looking for folks at our site. So just kind of a little high level, happy to chat in more detail at the appropriate time.
Chris?
Yeah, so I want to say exactly what Wade just said. I mean, so we're very similar, right? So we have 2,000, he has about 1,500. So we have all the different jobs that you would think about we're almost like a little city, right? So, and the opportunity to move your entire career, you could stay at one site or you could go anywhere globally. I found it interesting one time we were at a community college speaking with my friend Jerry, who I see somewhere in this room, and our vice president, general manager of North America. She was talking about how she started her career. She started as a temporary employee in that building, right? So there's plenty of opportunity for people to move through the organization. But we have them from entry level all the way up to the leadership team at the moment. I'm looking for a quality director if there happens to be one sitting out here. I think teamwork is super important. I think in the pharmaceutical industry, attention to detail is also super important, right? I've been in manufacturing for about 25 years. I've only been in pharmaceuticals for the last 2 years. But we make life-saving and life-sustaining drugs, right? I came from a company called Unilever, huge CPG, and we made body wash. It was a little more cucumber and a little less melon, not so good, but not the end of the world, right? When we make life-saving and life-sustaining drugs, attention to detail and what we're doing is super important. So I think that's also another trait that we're typically looking for.
Well, I would just say the same thing that they said in terms of, the opportunities that we have available. What's a little bit different for us is that we have a huge organization with Fujifilm. But for our particular location, we're almost looked at as a startup because we are starting the Holly Springs location. So you have to think like right now, we might only have about 100 employees, but we're growing and we're going to multiply that by 7 or 8. So this is a really good time to get your foot in the door. We have so many opportunities available from entry level to more experienced hires. And we even have some leadership and executive level opportunities available as well. What's really coming up and around the corner is our summer internship opportunities. So if anyone's interested in that, I can definitely talk to you afterwards. But we do have a lot of opportunities available right now.
Thank you, thank you. So teamwork, that's something that really stood out. And then also too, for the students here who have not acquired a summer internship, you heard that come up as well. So definitely, you know who to go to for that one. So this is a biggie, I think, for program leaders, counselors, for students. We really want to know what that secret sauce is when it comes to resumes. How can someone really make their resume stand out so that you take that second look and really invite them, in for that job, interview? Okay, let's start with you, Chris.
I mean, it depends on where you're at. I always feel sorry for high school students because what do you put on your resume, right? You put anything because you've got to fill that page at least a little bit, right? So if you're talking really entry level and you haven't had many opportunities, you can put anything. You can put volunteer experience, you can put your educational experience, put anything on it, right? As I look higher into the organization and I'm looking at a resume, then I'm looking at metrics, right? I want to see somebody who can speak kind of to the language that I'm used to seeing. So increase revenue by ABC, reduce right first time, increase right first time by ABC, right? So I like really nice bulleted points that show me that you speak kind of business language, if you would. And I think data points are really nice to see at that point.
Valerie?
For me, it depends on the level of hire. So if it's someone entry level or someone trying to make a career change, you might want to take a look at the job description and list your transferable skills or skills that are comparable for what they're looking for in the job description. Generally, the hiring manager and the person in people and culture made that job description, so that's specifically what they're looking for. So you really want to study that and make sure that your resume mirrors that so that you can speak to the experience that you have that's similar. In leadership positions, obviously, you're just looking at a really good track record of skills and accomplishments.
Yeah, so I'll say, and I think one thing that you mentioned with outcomes, right? That's what I would look at a resume. What are the outcomes? Not just what did I do, but what did I accomplish? So you had mentioned like metrics and responding to certain metrics and so forth and providing that outcome. I think that's really important on a resume is outcomes. I'd also add one other thing that maybe we haven't talked about yet, and that is beyond the resume is making the connection with either someone within the organization or somebody where you know your resume is going. Try and find out who is going to be receiving that resume. See if you can't make yourself stand out by leaving a phone message, LinkedIn message, email message if you're able to do that, something that would make your resume stand out. Because if you're getting, today we're heavily electronic, so resumes kind of go through our electronic system. Sometimes we may not even see them until they've already been at least screened once or twice. So if there's a way that you can get your name to the person who's hiring for that job, or even in the human resources area to make yourself stand out so that they go look for your resume, that would be a really helpful thing. It does show that you're really interested, and it shows that you took the initiative to go and dig and find out how you can connect with somebody who's within the organization.
I want to piggyback a little bit on what you said there. You're not a stalker if you look at their LinkedIn profile. I promise you. Do it, right? If you get to the point that you're at a point of an interview, check them out on LinkedIn, right? Because that's going to tell you about them. People love to know about people like themselves, right? So if you go in there and you understand what their background is, even that's flattering to them, and everybody loves to be flattered, right? I even check out their activities, right? So if you go on LinkedIn and you find somebody's profile and you can click on activity, you'll see what they liked, what they posted, and you'll get a sense of what's important to them, right? It's not cheating. It's setting yourself up for the most amount of success, and it's not stalking either, right? So check them out on LinkedIn. It's a great insight to the person that you're about to meet.
So I think we learned what that secret sauce is. Get that LinkedIn account set up if you haven't already. And then once you have it set up, test it out, as well. And you don't have to be afraid to reach out, make those connections, which are very, critical. Being able to have those transferable skills, having the data points, those bullet points as well. And write your accomplishments are very critical. So some things that we can and from entry level to higher level, things that we can all utilize moving forward. And that kind of lended some credence to one of the questions I had about, can you reach out on LinkedIn or something for an informational interview or a coffee chat, which it seems like that's something that's appropriate, in that respect.
Yeah, don't get your feelings hurt if they don't respond back, right? I mean, sometimes you do get a lot of people reach out to you, but try it, right? Sometimes people do respond back. And on LinkedIn, be mindful of what you're liking and what you're posting, because just like you can look at them, they can look at you, right? So just be very careful about what your branding is and what you're liking and posting on that same LinkedIn platform.
Yeah, and I would just reinforce the networking component. That's really an important. My daughter is in college right now. She's ready to graduate. She's looking for a job. So we just went through this whole resume discussion with her, and my feedback to her was, every time you meet somebody, get 2 names of 2 more people that you can network with from that person, because that person might not be looking for a job, or I'm sorry, looking to fill a job, but they may know somebody who is. And just keep that network going. If you always get 2 names, and if one doesn't come through, you can still find another person so that you keep building your network. And you can do that through LinkedIn, face-to-face, when we're done with COVID, hopefully, or any other way, emails and so forth. But I would really reinforce the networking part, because that's really important part.
Thank you, Wade. We appreciate that. And then also too, just keep in mind if from the community college to university levels, if, you're not sure about how to, instruct your students on LinkedIn, definitely, look out there to see who can actually come to your, community college or university to maybe lead a session, as well. When I worked for the BRITE program at NCCU, those are some of the things that we were able to do. And we were able to utilize the network through ISPE. So that may be also something that you want to look into, see how you can tap in there, so that you can have a really strong network of speakers who can speak on personal branding, LinkedIn, those type of things as well. But also too, look at, the individuals at the companies, because they're the ones, from your HR, talent acquisition, they're the ones who are going to be reviewing it as well. So definitely be able to tap in, network, and, have those sessions in place, for your students, so that they're fully aware and that they're prepared, before they actually apply for positions. So next question I had was, so what steps can people in our audience take in order to have a successful interview with your company? And are there any, tried and true tips that you can share with our audience today? Okay. Valerie, I'm gonna start with you. Yeah.
So I personally would say always research the company first. You don't want to show up to an interview and know nothing about the company, especially like, you can always look at what are the new initiatives that they are pursuing, what are some of the major projects that they have going on. That's really easy to find, and it actually helps you have a really good interview, because it's more of a conversation piece and you don't feel like you're being interviewed. You feel like you're having a conversation. So to help you out in both ways, but always just try to go armed with some information on the company. You already know your background and your experience. You can sell yourself, but you always want to sell the knowledge that you have about the company and what you could bring to the table.
I love that. I think that's, I ask that question all the time. Why do you want to work for us? Right? I want somebody to know. I want them to know who we are, rather than I just need a job. Right? So I think that's the best advice. I'll try to pile on something else, right? I think from a resume, from an interview standpoint, have a couple of stories in your pocket, right? Almost every interview is going to ask somewhat of the same kind of questions, right? And if you have 5 or 6, maybe 3 or 4 good success stories that you've had, that you played a part in, you can almost always fit your success story into one of the questions that they're going to ask, right? So have your claim to fame story in your pocket, act like you're pausing for a second, thinking about their question, and then give them your great answer, right? So, and they'll fit, they really will fit, right? So know your claim to fame a little bit.
And it's okay to have some notes in front of you. It's okay to look down at your notes if you need to. And the only thing I would add on to what was already said was, if you think of the position that you're applying for and you're interviewing for, and you think of the competencies or the proficiencies that you would need in that job. So we talked about teamwork today. We've talked about attention to detail. As you're thinking of your stories, try and think of stories that align with the skills needed for that job. So attention to detail, think of your story that shows how well you do with attention to detail. Think of a story that demonstrates your ability to work with a team. Maybe that demonstrates your ability to work with a dysfunctional team. Sometimes you have those too. But if you have 4 or 5 stories and they're aligned with what you think the job is going to require, that's going to be your best bet. But almost every time you can use a story that you have in your head related to the question that's asked, and you might twist it a little bit, you know, make it fit a little bit better. But a story is better, even if it's not perfectly matched to the question, than not having a story at all.
Expect your questions to start out, think, tell me about a time when. I mean, on a purple elephant and an orange elephant, they thought it was going to be a green elephant. No, I mean, they're going to be sometimes feeling a little bit weird, but they're almost always going to ask you questions that say, tell me about a time when, right? So that's when you have those stories in your pocket. This is a curiosity question for me. Raise your hand if you send a thank you note of any kind at the end of your interview. Good. Call me old school, but I like those, right? I like a little quick email that says, thanks for your time. This is what I heard you were looking for. This is what I'm bringing. And this is how I'm even more excited now that I've had the time to talk to you, right? I mean, write that note. You'll save it forever. You'll send it to everybody. They'll still feel special, right? But send the note.
Excellent. All right. So when everyone leaves, you have to think about what is that claim to fame story that you have in your back pocket that you can pull out, you know, when you need it. You know, and alignment is important, and also doing that research about the company. And those, you know, will take you to that next level and have you prepared, you know, for that interview. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. So as far as with interviewing, are you all still doing virtual interviews at this point? And if you are, is there a different approach that you have as opposed to doing virtual interviews as opposed to, you know, in-person ones right now?
We're still doing virtual interviews initially. Now, if you progress to maybe a second interview, then you may come on site, especially now with COVID really starting to reduce the number of cases. So you'll likely get a second interview on site. So we are doing virtual. And one tip for virtual interviews, and you've probably already done this, so I'm probably telling you something you already know. Test out your technology. Please get a friend, call them on your, do a Zoom, practice Zoom, and make sure that the audio is working properly. This was just yesterday that I had an interview virtually, and it was for an upper level position. And the audio was very, very hard to understand the individual who was on the other side. And there was an echo, and just make sure that your technology is working. And I'd practice with a friend before you do it.
I just wanted to add to, just make sure if you're doing a virtual interview, this probably doesn't have to be said, but make sure you're dressed professionally and you have no background noise. A lot of times, you know, there are other people maybe home or things of that nature. Just make sure you just get to a quiet place and that you don't have a lot of things happening behind you, because it's just a distraction and you don't want to be remembered for that. You want to be remembered for your great answers and your great interview. Oh, and I'm sorry. We are doing, we're doing virtual interviews, but we're also doing interviews in the office as well, especially for more senior level positions and leadership positions.
We might start out virtual, but at this point, we also bring people in, particularly operators who might be in a CGMP environment. We want them to see the amount of gowning that you have to go through in order to take that job, because it's not for everybody, right? So we've done turnover analysis, and we realize we lose people for that. And so we think it's important for people to see the entire environment.
Great, thank you. So you've heard it. So make sure that even if it's being done in your bedroom, that those pajamas are not what you're wearing. Or some may have a jacket on top and pajama bottoms, so to make sure you don't stand up and show something. But yeah, no distractions. And then, you know, hopefully you'll move forward, you know, to that face-to-face. So definitely, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
I would just add though, if your cat comes in while you're interviewing, that's okay. We recognize people are at home. We're not going to hold it against you. Try and get a quiet place, but sometimes that stuff happens.
What about the crying baby in the background?
Well, yeah, babies cry.
Just checking.
I gotta say, it has nothing to do with this conference, but I was on a call and this lady's like middle schooler son came through in his tidy whities. And he realized halfway through where he was at that he was on the, and he didn't know if he should keep going or back up. And we just all laughed, right? I mean, those things do happen, but as much as you can control them, control them.
Well, I
want to add, just try to blur your background, right? So that way, no one really knows what's going on behind you and only you know. So just blur it.
All right, all good tips, all good tips. Okay, so just to ask something else, so what, if any, programs and policies do your company have in place to increase diversity in the hiring process at this time? Or, and if you don't already have it, what, programs you see yourself, initiating within the future, that everyone can be kind of aware of moving forward?
Well, I just have to say TBD because that's what I was hired for 2 weeks ago.
Great things
So-
are coming.
Right. So definitely great things are coming down the pipeline. We do have the support of the larger organization. So obviously I'm going to be meeting with them to see what their blueprint is and then tweaking it to fit the Holly Springs location. But I can just say that our leadership team is very much behind diversity and they want to take whatever our parent company was doing that and multiply it by 100. So I will get back to you all.
So diversity is super important to us, right? Our CEO, Mark Casper, has a diverse family, right? And he spoke a lot about this in the last couple of years because it was super important to him. We have very active ERGs. So we have African American Heritage Group, we have Veterans ERGs, we have Women's ERGs, we have LGBT. Hey, we believe we are a better company when we're a diverse company. We know that. All the stats tell us that, right? Even if we didn't believe it, the stats tell us that. So we have a lot of initiatives. We have a lot of diversity panels. We have mentor circles. We partnered recently with HBCUs and we have goals against hiring from our HBCUs. We're fortunate in North Carolina. That seems to be a hotbed, right? So we think it's super important.
Yeah, I would echo what everyone has said. We all recognize the importance of a diverse workforce. Some of the things that we're doing in particular, we make sure that all of our interview panels are diverse. All of our candidate pools are diverse. We also have a very active diversity and inclusion council at our site, which helps make sure that we're having activities and so forth that are multicultural, and it's connected to our employee business resource groups, which you mentioned already. But it's a really important thing, and I'm so glad that we are at this point where we're really focusing on it and really increasing just the great people that we have at our company.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So it's always good to know what the companies are doing, as far as DEI, and being able to go on their website and kind of read about that and see what their diversity statement is. And if they don't have one, maybe ask some questions and see, are they trying to put some things, in place? One of the things that Chris mentioned, basically partnering with HBCUs in the area. I know that was one of the big things when I was at NCCU with the BRITE program, being able to attend some of these HBCU days. And I remember us doing that, with companies like Merck. So that was always a great opportunity. So definitely, you want to make sure to, really do your homework and make sure that that your voice is going to be heard, because your voice matters. And so I really appreciate everyone sharing that information. I just had one last question for you all before we open it up to the audience. As far as the job market or industry, what have you seen has changed the most since the onset of the pandemic? And anyone can start.
Well, I'll state the obvious, right? Just not being able to be face to face with one another is really difficult. Many of us have had to figure out new ways of working at home with kids in the background and cats on the table. And I can really appreciate how challenging it is for some folks who have multiple responsibilities at home and they're trying to do a full-time job. Like you're helping your kids with school because it's virtual. You've got all of the regular duties that are going on at home, and then you're trying to do a full-time job and stay concentrated and focused. I'm really pleased, and I'm sure the other companies do the same, but I'm really pleased how Merck has responded to that with creating a lot more flexibility. We're even going to be moving to a lot more of hybrid approach going forward, even when COVID is over. We recognize that people can be successful working at home, and they can be successful working non-traditional hours. maybe 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. is your best time to work. Maybe 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. is your best time to work. And we're working very hard to create an environment where we can be a lot more flexible and allow people that more flexibility. So I think you're going to see that trend continue in many companies that were more flexible. But gosh, we're so excited to get back together face to face. Wow, that'll be really great when we can do that.
If you're an employee out there right now, you're in a good spot, right? I mean, I remember 2008, and I had to lay people off, and I was putting them in a job market where there were no jobs, right? So I can tell you that we're begging for employees, right? And we're a fantastic place to work, right? So it is a good time out there to be looking for a job if you're interested in working, because the opportunities are there, different, I think, than they were like in 2008 or something like that. So if you are looking for a job, I think you're in a good spot. It sounds like we all have opportunities, and we'd love to have you.
For our environment, I would say that maybe 75% of us are on site, but we follow safety protocols. I mean, we have the temperatures at the front door. We have COVID, like this smart sheet you have to fill out every day to say who you've been around for longer than 15 minutes. We just want to be super safe. And then we give out the N95 mask, COVID test for home, even for you and your family. We just do a whole bunch just to make sure everybody is okay. But we don't force you to be at work. If you want to work from home, that is completely fine too. We just have a very collaborative environment, so individuals tend to want to come in, but they can work a hybrid role or work remotely.
Great, excellent. So hybrid positions are still available. Jobs are available out there like never before. And we definitely have a lot of companies coming to the RTP area, to the state of North Carolina, period. So there's a lot of growth. So this is especially a great time, like Chris said, as well, for you to be looking for positions as well. Safety, always a big thing as well. But flexibility, I think a lot of companies now see that flexibility is something that's quite important. And they're really looking at, the whole family, even though there may just be that one individual working at that company, but they understand that the role that you have at the company and at home as well. So that's something that's great to see. Okay, so I think now we can open it up for some questions from anyone in the audience, for Wade, for Chris, or for Valerie. So they're here to give you a job. No, I'm just playing, but yeah, they're here to answer your questions.
Yeah, folks have questions. There's the microphone there, and I'm happy to give you this one. And then folks who are online, you can put your question in the Q&A, but put it so that it goes to everyone, not just the panelists. Otherwise, we won't be able to see it, is my understanding. So we have someone monitoring that if there's any questions in the Q&A. But yeah, anyone from this audience have a question for our panelists?
Don't be shy.
Yeah, Lisa, do you want to just grab the one in the front there? I don't think it's on. You have to flip it on.
We heard you though.
Oh, we did.
So one question that got me thinking was when, for example, when I did my internship for my interview before that, I, looked at the website and I wrote questions down, and even questions that weren't really related to the company, just questions that I knew was relevant, I wrote them down. But would you say that asking questions in the interview is a good appearance?
Definitely. I specifically look for people who are inquisitive. That means you want to learn, you want to know more. That's a trait, like a soft skill that you can't put in a job description. So definitely asking questions is very important in an interview. The interviewer should not be the only person asking questions.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think just like you have your story, have your question, right? I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but as an HR director, I've had to talk managers off the ledge. I'm like, no, that was a really good candidate. Like, but they didn't ask any questions. And it's a really good candidate. Maybe you answered them all. So I do think that have at least a question, because a lot of times that you'll wrap it up that way. Well, do you have any questions? Right. So I would put at least a question in my pocket.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's something that none of us mentioned earlier, but questions are important. And I would definitely have you could have some softball questions. Tell me about the growth of your company. What do you expect to be 3 years from now? They'll go on for an hour on that. But you want to have a couple of thoughtful questions, and then, ask if there's any questions that any clarification that the interviewer needs based on the answers that you'd already provided.
An interview should be a two-way street, right? You guys have as much right to know about the company as the company has to know about you, right? And I want to think that the candidate is not just willing to take any job, that they want a job that they're interested in, that they're going to be excited about, that they're not going to come and just fill the gap for 2 weeks and then give me turnover, right? So when you ask those questions, it makes me kind of want you a little more, right?
I'll ask a question, then we'll get one from the audience. So we had some folks on the success panel earlier who had transitioned industries, and I know you have talked about transferable skills. I heard attention to detail. Are there other sort of really obvious transferable skills that y'all can share that for folks who've been in other industries, they can really apply that to their resume, to an application?
Manufacturing is transferable, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's consumer goods. I mean, I came from consumer goods. A filler is a filler is a filler, right? And a lot of times it's even FDA regulated, right? So manufacturing, in my mind, manufacturing experience, if you want to be in pharma, manufacturing is still a transferable skill. You don't have to have come from Merck or Thermo Fisher to go to a Pfizer or whatever, right? So in the top of my head, a transferable skill is experience in a manufacturing environment.
Yeah, just knowing GMP, good manufacturing principles, we kind of take it to the next level when you're in an FDA regulated environment. But if you understand GMP, that's a really big component in getting into biotech or pharma. And the NC Works program, which is a 3-month certificate program, is a wonderful opportunity for you to learn a little bit about pharma and biotech. And we would look at that skill as a preferable skill versus somebody who hadn't gone through that certificate program.
Wait, do you mean BioWork, right?
I'm sorry. What did I say?
You said NC Works, BioWork.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm in the wrong place to make that mistake.
Thank you. Again, for people at home, if you could just put things specifically in the Q&A box, that will help us out a lot. But to follow up on the question about asking questions, you guys have all kind of mentioned that culture can be something for candidates to be aware of when they apply. Are there questions or things that you specifically think candidates should ask to get a feel for the culture at different workplaces other than just, our culture is great?
Everyone's going to say that, right? If you say, what's your culture? It's fantastic. So I think that that's almost too general of a question, because you're asking a question that is going to give only that answer, right? No one's going to say, well, really, so I think stay away from the general, all those softball questions are okay. I thought that was a really good one that Wade said about what's your growth and so on and so, but what's your culture like is, I don't think you're going to gain anything from that question.
Well, honestly, you can ask, say for instance, you're an introvert and very quiet, and you can say, will I fit in well with the team or department? Some managers don't mind when someone is just heads down doing their work all day, but some managers want people who are super engaging. So it's okay to ask, like, what personalities mesh well with that particular department? So that way there's not a mismatch there.
I'm not sure I have much more to add. I think those are both really good answers. I think I do get that question a lot. Tell us about the culture, and it is hard to kind of pinpoint exactly what that person was really looking for. So maybe even thinking a little bit further, what kind of an environment do you thrive in? And then ask a question as it relates to the environment that you prefer.
recent graduates, do you see empty spaces on a resume as a red flag or a green flag?
I mean, I would expect you not to have the same resume as somebody who's been in the industry for 25 years. I think it's perfectly reasonable for you to have empty spaces. I think when, in resumes in general, when you have big gaps, I think there's plenty of good answers for big gaps. Expect to be asked that question. But as a recent grad, there's not going to, put your volunteer work if you have it. If you have to, put your coursework in there. Put whatever you can I mean, some people say don't put your personal interest in there. I go, whatever, put your personal interest in there. Sometimes I see them and I go, look, they played field hockey like me, which I'm not supposed to. But anyway, I don't think gaps are a problem. I think that everybody who is interviewing understands the difference between somebody who's been in the industry for 25 years and somebody who is a new grad, and they were a new grad themselves at some point.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, but I also would add, you might want to put things in there about the projects that you worked on with other students. So that way it shows your teamwork ability and it shows an accomplishment. So it's a win-win for you.
A senior project is great. I totally agree with that. That's a great answer. Put your senior project on there if you have, because it'll show all kinds of accomplishments.
Yeah, ditto. I mean, yeah, I was telling you earlier, but my daughter who was getting ready to get into the job market, and she said, Dad, I don't have what I'll put in my resume. And I said, well, think about the work that you've done, like leading a project team, or she's involved in athletics and she's a captain of her sport team. I said, think of how you have to organize people, keep people together, motivate them, energize them. Use that. Those are great, stories to have, to share. It shows your ability to get along with other people, integrate, take action, proactive, things. So yeah, I don't think there's an issue either. Just come up with some really cool things that you did while you were, in that gap period.
Good luck. We have entry-level spots for you.
I think I'm pretty loud talking. Thank you. So I have a question in an interview. Normally in an interview, you're interviewing them, they're interviewing you. However, I feel like a key part of the job is not really discussed during the interview. For instance, pay. Most job postings don't have the pay. And so when you are researching the job and researching, what it's worth, most time pay doesn't come up until the job is actually offered, but you haven't really had the opportunity to really know where that job and the pay compares to other opportunities. Yeah. So what's your recommendation for how do you bring up pay in an interview, but not sounding like it's just about pay, but just giving yourself adequate information for the job?
That's such a good question, right? And I don't have a great answer, okay? I mean, I can tell you as an HR professional, I go there, right? I mean, particularly if it's a passive candidate that I'm kind of trying to talk up, I say, what are your salary expectations? Nobody should ask you what you make, right? I mean, they just shouldn't. Pay equity, we should be far enough along in pay equity that we know not to ask that question. But they may ask you what's your salary expectation, a perfectly fair question. And if I were to ask you what's your salary expectation, right? I might not tell you what the job is, but I'm gonna say, what's your salary expectation? You're gonna say, I wanna make $150,000. I'm gonna say, does this job pay $150,000? I'm gonna say, well, that's in the range, right? And if it's not, I'm gonna say, it's probably a little bit higher, too high for the range, right? This may not be the right opportunity for you. But your question was a better question because you said, what if I don't say that to you, right? I think at a certain point, once you've established that relationship in the nicest, kindest way possible, you can say, can you give me a general idea of what the ballpark salary might be for this particular role? That person wouldn't have gone to work if they weren't paid, right? So we all know pay is a motivator to go to work. It's a fair question, and you're saving everybody time if it's not the right answer for both of you, right? So I wouldn't lead it as your first question. I would wait till you'd establish a little bit of a rapport, but I don't think it's an off the table question. But the two of you might disagree.
I agree 100%. It's not an off the table question. It is something I think at our company, we normally cover that in some of the initial discussions where we will ask about salary expectations to make sure that there's an alignment. So before you spend a lot of time on a position that either doesn't pay what you're expecting or there's just a mismatch there. I suspect that if you get to a point where a conversation hasn't come up yet, I think it's very fair for you to say, what's the salary range for this position? Because my expectation is X. Again, I wouldn't do that as your leading question, but probably somewhere before the end of the conversation, you don't want to walk away unless you kind of have a sense of whether this is the right job for you.
I agree. I can't add anything else to that. I definitely think that you shouldn't be shy about asking what the range is. I think that's a perfectly fine question, but just make sure, like both of my colleagues said, you don't want to ask that up front, like the first question. Definitely want to establish a rapport, make sure the conversation is flowing, and then just say, you know what, I am considering a couple of opportunities right now. Just want to make sure that this is in the range. Could you please disclose that?
Don't apologize either. Like, I think you're a grown-up person and it's a grown-up part of the decision, right? So you don't have to say, I'm sorry to ask this. You're there for a job that pays money that you're going to be happy with, right? So don't say, I'm sorry to have to ask this. Just, it's a business question. It's a business relationship.
Hi, I am looking to transition from academia into industry, and I've seen recommendations that when writing your resume, it's okay to change your language around. So instead of referring to, so if I've got experience with teaching and in a research lab, instead of referring to students, you call them clients. Your research PI is now your manager. Do you think, especially when describing like achievements and tasks and stuff on the resume, that that is appropriate and would help translate my skills to industry, or would you find it misleading?
Good question. I think it's okay. I think it's okay to get I think it's going to come out in the interview process, right? But I think you're selling yourself in the best way you can. And if you believe that what you're doing in that classroom is the same skill set that you would be doing in that lab, then I'm okay with that, right? As long as you can then, once we're talking, sell me on the concept that it's the same skill set and it's transferable. I might have an aha moment I might not have had you put it the other way, and you might not have gotten past that first step, right? But be prepared to make the bridge for me, right? But that's a personal answer. I don't know if the rest of you like.
I would go back to the conversation we had about your stories. Align your story about what you've learned in academia to what you assume that role would require. So leadership, well, if you're in a classroom environment in academia, then you're leading the class. There's hundreds of great examples of how you have to manage conflict, how you have to manage time pressures, multiple priorities. You can take all of that and just, as you mentioned, just try and change the language to fit the job that you are pursuing.
You can do it. You can train on it. You can lead it. That's what you're doing if you're in academia, right? So I'm cool with that.
For me, it just shows your level of creativity. So I like to look at it from that perspective. I don't think it's anything negative. I think you'll tell the whole story once you have the interview.
Any last questions for the Okay. Well, thank you so much to our panel and our moderator, Natasha. I really appreciate it. All right, for those of you virtually joining us, that is it for us today. For those of you here in person, we'll have a little bit more time for networking so you can ask your own personal questions to these folks, network, meet with them, take all of that advice that they just gave you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Please feel free to reach out with questions if you have them, or if you'd like to get involved with BPD. We're always looking for folks to help plan our events. It's not a huge time lift, I promise. So please let me know if you're interested in that as well. But yeah, thank you. Please enjoy the rest of the networking, and we'll see you at a future event.
Hey, guys, I'm going to leave some cards that I'll just sit up here. So if you have to run out, but you want to grab something, all it has is our job board on it. So jobs.thermofisher.com. So to check out the more than 300 jobs I have in Greenville. Okay. But we also have other locations as well, right? And then I'm probably going to stay around for a few minutes, but my CEO, Mark Casper's coming in, and I have every president that tags along sitting back in Greenville. So in about 15 minutes, I'm going to bolt out, not because I don't love you. I thought this was fantastic. Okay.
What about LinkedIn? Would it be okay if anyone in the audience would like to connect with you three on
Absolutely.
LinkedIn
Absolutely.
after this event?
Too,
Absolutely,
and I'll leave
definitely.
some of my cards too as well, but definitely look for me on LinkedIn. You can use the information from my business card to find me.
Yep, ditto.
Yeah.
I think this has been excellent, everyone. Thank you so much. We appreciate you staying to hear this panel session. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Natasha.